Hi, welcome back. And now let's move on to our first discussion. With less than a week to this year's Eid al-Kabir celebration, Muslim faithfuls across Nigeria are lamenting the high cost of ram and other animals permissible for slaughtering, even as traders attribute the exponential increase to the economic realities in the country. Now, market surveys in Abuja, Lagos, Kwara and Kano states reveal as much as 100% increase in the cost of some of the animals and also the commodities, which traders have said affects the volume of trade compared to the previous years. Now, while many of the traders attributed the increase in the cost of the animals and food items to the high cost of transportation occasioned by the recent removal of subsidy on petroleum, motor spirit, on others as well. Others, especially those that import animals and some goods from neighboring countries, blame the increase of the naira devaluation, which has weakened the purchasing power of the country's currency. Now we have in the studio Hashim Salahuddin, a public commentator, and Dr. Tefa Abraham, an economist, to look at the challenges of shopping for Eid amidst subsidy removal. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Welcome to the program, gentlemen. So, Dr. Hashim, let me start with you. Perhaps you should tell us what your thoughts are, about the current rise in the cost of livestock and animals, ahead, as well as other commodities ahead of the Eid celebration.
Yeah, I mean, it is only natural that because that PMS has its own effects across the entire commodity market. And when on May 29th, the president at that time made that declaration, of course, instantly it was translated into a policy action. And that actually necessitated the 100% skyrocketing prices that we noticed across board. Unfortunately, there were no mitigation that were put in place before this declaration happened, and we didn't see any sort of government deliberate immediate action plan. Yes, there are conversations ongoing, but of course, knowing fully well that we have about 133 million people living below poverty line, they are going to be the first to bear the brunt of this situation. And unfortunately, Nigerians are actually suffering from an age-long political and economic mismanagement of the subsidy regime. Because what we should have seen in the first instance is actually a probe into that particular regime for a particular years. Then, of course, we can delve into the removal entirely, preparing the minds of Nigerians. But unfortunately, it came as a shock, it came as a surprise. And then, of course, the shock has affected prices, and this has also adversely affected a number of value chains.
Ilyasu is the chairman of Ram Sellers
This is the current situation as it were.
He says the price
of course, the
of
knock-on
ram and
effect
other
is
related
that there
animals
will be some kind of prices that will jack up 100%, just like you mentioned in your intro. This is actually affecting every single commodity in the market. Obviously, family are going to be suffering because particularly for those who are low-income earners, this is going to have some little bit of challenge and setback. And as you can see, the purchasing power is also very low. People are unable to buy. And this also is just a clear translation to the fact that people are not even accessible to the current availability of cash. So accessibility is a problem, availability is a problem, affordability is a problem. So these three pillars are really going to be an issue for us to deal with in the coming days.
Okay, let's come to you, Dr. Tefa. Now, from an economic perspective, right, what factors do you actually believe is responsible for the high cost of transportation and also in its impact on the prices of goods?
Okay, economically, if you fuel in the Nigerian economy plays a central role in a typical general equilibrium model. Just imagine like a cobweb. Fuel price is that point at the middle whereby once there's a shake or a distortion in the model, every other sector responds. And that's because of the monolithic structure of our Nigerian economy, depending on crude oil and fuel over a long period of time. In an ideal economy where all sectors are vibrant and is diversified, no sector can have that kind of global impact on an economy. But the Nigerian economy right now is structured in a way that it is monolithic, and crude oil price plays a central role in terms of having effect on the overall stability. Then subsidy being associated with fuel price of PMS in Nigeria, made it to become like that policy handle where the government uses to reach out to poor people, vulnerable people, and to ameliorate the impact of our economic environment on everybody. So things are expensive, salary is low, fuel subsidy. You want to reach out to people that are socially excluded, unemployed, poverty is high, fuel subsidy. So rather than strengthening our national social investment program over the years, from FIP to MAMSA to all those, the one under Jonathan, the subsidy withdrawal regime, and the current national social investment program, rather than strengthening this thing over the years, fuel subsidy became that approach of reaching out to the Nigerian people. Remember under President Obasanjo, when they were to end toll gate, the next thing was to put subsidy on price and subsidy on PMS. So it became the pathway to reaching out to, it became an economic intervention policy program for the Nigerian economy, rather than strengthening social institutions and ensuring that any adverse effect on the economy is ameliorated through planned mechanism. So that is the role that fuel price plays. So but like you said, the withdrawal of the fuel subsidy is the major factor responsible for this distortion in price. However, we shouldn't act like the fuel subsidy withdrawal was sudden. The person that made it sudden was President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. Right from the preparation of 2023 budget, we all knew from the federal government budget that fuel subsidy will end by June. But around 1 month, 3 weeks to the end of President Muhammadu Buhari's administration, the Minister of Finance announced that it had been suspended indefinitely. So they would have just allowed that discussion to continue. So that indefinitely, people just became unexpected. Relax. Then on the day of swearing in, we just heard those 4 words: fuel subsidy has ended. And the markets began to react. Sellers, buyers began to react. Hoarding started. Artificial pricing started. Then we have all these issues we have now.
Okay, Dr. Tefa, so yes, subsidy is gone. That's the root shock we all got on May 29. But then again, aside from subsidy removal, we know that there is Naira devaluation. So can you also explain how this has affected the purchasing power of Nigerians, as we are seeing today?
The Naira devaluation is relative to the US dollar. And ideally, economically, there's this thing we call the law of one price. The price of any asset or commodity, asset meaning stock price, bond price, price of cars, anything, the chain you wear, the head tie, the shoe, the price of any of these assets should be the same worldwide. That's the law of one price. In other words, typically, the price of a typical McDonald's donut should be the same in US as in Lagos as in Canada. Similarly, the price of our well-packaged kulikuli in Nigeria should be the same in Minna, Niger State, and the same in Netherlands, and the same in Austria. So that's the law of one price. Then the law of any commodity, gold, for example, diamond, should be the same. Now, and currencies trade, the international trade uses dollar a lot and other international currencies. So once a country's economy or a country's currency is weak, or it is being made to reflect its artificial value, that is where international markets begin to shy away from that economy. So economics, from the classical angle, wants every country to have an exchange rate that is floated, that is not being distorted by forceful regulation. Just allow the goods or services of your country to reflect international price so that investors can move freely. Classic economic thinking is that markets are integrated, so investors can move in free entry, free exit, consumers are rational, good, everybody is transitive and consistent. But because of the pricing of our own Naira related to the dollar, which over the time under Emefiele was overmanaged, investors shied away because the value of $100 in Nigerian economy will not be $100, so everybody moved away. So that policy move in terms of unifying the exchange rate economically is a good move. It comes back to that my discussion on law of one price, so that Bill Gates, Microsoft, our own Dangote refinery, the lady selling Ankara, the other guy selling diamond, everybody can trade worldwide, using the entire global market as one marketplace where prices reflect their own their true price. So this is the economic thinking. Of course, the law of one price has a lot of assumptions. It assumes that markets are free and fair. It assumes that regulation is clear. It assumes there's no transportation cost. It assumes that no transaction cost. Of course, by the time you factor this thing into the Nigerian market, you will see that prices will distort some way. Yes. So just like the commentator said, rather than just allowing the Nigerians to face this all of a sudden exposure to pure economic thinking, we needed to have really anticipated. Because like I said in my discussion on law of one price, transportation cost is not free. There are regulatory issues, there are legal issues that need to be addressed through laws. These things would have been fixed before you just allow these things to hit us all of a sudden like that. But in terms of economic thinking, it looks good, but the effect now is how it affects the people. A lot of thinking and consultation need to go on to be able to ameliorate this effect.
All right, let's come back to you, Mr. Hashim. Now, you also talked about, the purchasing power of the people. Now, experts have actually said that we've not even seen the end of it. In July, it's likely to get worse. They also say that inflation is expected to rise following the current depreciation of the naira. Now, how bad do you think it will get for Nigerians and also for the economy when there's a low demand for goods by the consumers?
Yeah, I think that is going to be a little bit of an issue, knowing fully well that you're also going to have a dip in income. And of course, when inflation also jacks to the roof, this would mean that there will be a lot of luxury item would definitely be things that people would have to shy away from in the interim, and also you have not added that the cost of electricity also is likely going to jack in July.
And airfares too.
Oh yes, so if you put all of these indicators together, it tells you very clearly that those within the average income bracket would have quite a lot to confront in the coming month, and of course it is not like in the immediate that we are going to be seeing the effect and the value chain that the subsidy removal are going to be translating into. But maybe there will be some level of social intervention and social investment. Maybe those who, like he mentioned, over the years should have been strengthened. Over the years, I think one of the biggest challenges we have in the country is that our social security infrastructure has been largely undermined, and that is because we do not have we have had successive governments who never had the poor in mind, and this is because it is an elite capture of the society. And when you have a society where the elites are the ones who determine policies and programs, they see it from that prism. And when you have the issue of morality and legality coming into economic conversation, then it begins to have this kind of interpretation to say, okay, if we have to do this, then it is a moral issue. Maybe we are doing a favor to the citizens, forgetting that one of the things you took on when you took the oath of office was to provide some kind of welfare that would actually, so living standard had actually reduced and might reduce further until probably in another 6 months to 12 months when we see some sort of reinvestment of what the subsidy removal would do. That is if you don't disaggregate the issue of corruption into it anymore. Because what we are going to likely see is that tendencies are there that if investment in infrastructure happens, then we are likely going to some kind of offshoot. For instance, electricity becomes very constant. Yes, it will be difficult to access because of the cost, but you are going to see some kind of smallholder investors trying to also do their thing. And then, of course, the economy is actually fluid. One of the biggest consequences of the absence of this kind of investment is the fact that small, medium enterprises have suffered the consequences. It is cheaper for you to import rather than for you to produce. Overhead is very high. And that is very clear because people believe that, look, if you have to pay so much for electricity that is even not there, you have to pay for it because you are actually connected to the grid. And of course, you have to pay to buy diesel and service your own water head and service overhead costs. So all of the overhead costs and of course multiple taxation. So the enabling environment for a smallholder investor to survive is actually very weak. And that was why I talked about the fact that investors naturally will take the back seat because they realize very clearly that, look, it is not profitable for us to get into this economy for now. Maybe again, because of this harmonization, we will see some level of revitalization that people will now begin to, the players want to now come in and say, look, then maybe there is some level of hope. And then, of course, the monetary policy. And if you look at the president, for the first time, he decided to change a number of templates. He didn't appoint a special advisor on economic matters. He did two things. He appointed a special advisor on revenue. He appointed a special advisor on monetary policy, because he knew very clearly that those are the two biggest elephants that he must tackle if he needed to make some quick impact. So I'm hoping that those templates would actually yield some immediate remediation, because what we need now is remediation plan. Now, but until the issue of salary increment and all that come in, what are the remedial measures that must be put in place? You need massive investment in transportation, for instance. 100% increase in transport system across is actually huge in a place where government is not even investing in those kind of arena. So it is very important that we take a look holistically at all of this infrastructure, see what we can do otherwise, and if we continue in our usual policy somersault regime, going into the subsidy removal, I think Nigerians are really going to be facing a very daunting situation.
All right, Doctor, you were doing a lot of nodding while Dr. Salahuddin was talking, so perhaps you have something to add to it. And let me also add a follow-up. Do you see any other factors, maybe such as supply chain disruptions or market insufficiencies, that might also add to the challenge or the problem that we face?
Well, I say luckily now, COVID-19 prepared us for the hard times. So already, like for example now, certainly there will be disruptions in supply and demand chains, but it will be, this time around, it's coming from transactional cost angle. From COVID-19, we had total shutdown in demand and supply channels because of that component of stay at home, sit at homes, that kind of angle. But this time around, supply and demand channels will be affected through transactional cost and increase in transportation costs and all those other costs associated with it. So what people need to do is to innovate around how to beat this cost. For example, people already, COVID-19 has exposed us to online way of having meetings. Increasingly, I often see people like you in the media having difficulties getting guests on a regular. You may have to invest in your online infrastructure so that people can join. And then for the people, for small traders already, like I said, because of COVID-19, through the linkage with their daughters and sons and neighbors, you see that woman who sells, that typical woman that sells yam, or that typical man that sells ram, is now in partnership with his young son or young daughter neighbor or young son neighbor to use their social media platform as plug so that they sell. This social infrastructure that we built around COVID-19 needs to be reactivated this time around. But this on the side of the people, what they need to do to ameliorate. Government function in the economy is welfareist. Markets are certainly out there for profit making. Anybody in the market is private sector. Government intervention must be welfareist. And the idea in a developing and emerging economy like ours here in Nigeria is to find where there are disequilibrium or distortions and to see how to help the people ameliorate those effects. And that's why it's important that government would continue to think about what to introduce this time around to ameliorate the effect. Many offices are already thinking of introducing bus fares to ameliorate the transport costs. Others are thinking of cutting down work days. However it is, something needs to be done, especially through wage increase. It's been long that we talked about minimum wage review, and this time around, it's not just the wage increase. Where you look at the inflationary angle, the energy cost, a lot of things need to be looked at, so that intervention will come in a way that it will reduce mitigate the adverse impact on people, but at the same time, not reintroducing subsidy in other aspects that will inflate corruption again. So this is the challenge that government, and that's why the answer for government is wide consultation, executive, legislature, judiciary, CSOs, expert, academia, sitting in different fora, just to find out how best to go about this.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Hashim, Sallah is, just around the corner, and we also know that we're still feeling the, pressure, the renewed pressure from all these reforms that the Tinubu administration is actually, bringing into play. Now, as far as we know, you can't even get a ram for 100,000 naira anymore. I think I read a report of Kwara State where it goes for 400,000 naira. You know, considering exactly. Now considering that, you know, Nigerians are facing this and that, it's actually sad to say that. Well, I have to say that a lot of them will not be able to celebrate, you know, this Sallah with ease. Now, what does it also affects the businesses as well. What does it mean for the economy and also Nigeria if we keep losing businesses? Because we've already lost a lot from the past administration with their policies and all that, and we're seeing, you know, a likelihood of that happening in this administration as well.
Yeah, if you do the graphical analysis, and I'm sure Dr. Tefa will be able to elucidate a little bit more, you will realize that we are a little bit on deep when it comes to the issue of businesses in this country. Unfortunately, we are more of a consuming economy now, more than producing, because most of the manufacturers and small business are a little bit on the dive. And I think for me, that should be one of the primary aim and focus for government, because if we produce more, one, we will end forex, and it will mean that we'll have to reduce the number of things. Two is the fact that with the new harmonization, it will allow us to keep our foreign reserve without even touching it, and probably swell it for a while, and then that can attract investors. And the third bit would be for me is to introduce some level of control, okay, price control mechanism. If you do that, I think it will be able to stabilize to a large extent and provide people with some better alternatives. Second bit of it, and the flip side to it rather, is the fact that maybe it will also reduce our appetite for foreign goods. Okay, Nigerians are too classical, and we want to have this sophistry approach to most of our wares, you know, clothes, shoes, household items, cars. Maybe if we do those kind of localization of what we did, China did it, and of course, it went a very long way. Today we saw what China economy looks like. We need to also find a way to localize for us to be able to grow, and probably then after some years, we can begin to focus on that. But answering your question directly, is the fact that the loss in purchasing power and goods and services and access will not stop until we're able to find the right policy that can help us to do that kind of safeguard. Because what we need now is a safeguard measure, and that's why I talked about the welfarist approach by government. Because the welfare of citizens, the security and welfare, and the security is actually not just physical security, economic security, because livelihood is also a security. You need to find that kind of security that citizens can actually be very comfortable to be able to transact and engage in it. And I can tell you that in the last 2-3 weeks, since this regime had come into office, one thing is very classical, that access and purchasing power has dropped by 50%, if not 100%. And that is because even those who sell the PMS themselves now can tell you very clearly that nobody even comes in to buy anymore, because they have lost so much market. Of course, I mean, how are you able to buy, okay, when you are able to have a minimum wage of 30,000 and you are going to buy 10 litre for close to 15,000 naira thereabout. So that tells you very, and that 10 litre, if you live, unfortunately, if you live in Zuba or Gwagwalada and you have to come to the central area to work, is a bit of a problem, because 10 litre is gone. So how do you manage and survive? So that in itself will promote people finding alternative within the system. So corruption would actually begin to creep in, because maybe areas you weren't looking at before, you have to find some kind of alternative in that regard. There may be, again, government will need to find a way to look at its existing templates. For instance, you don't have to put every government infrastructure within the city center, decentralize. Find one ministry, put it in Gwagwalada, put one ministry somewhere in Zuba, so that people can actually, within their neighborhood, have access. Then people can live proximity to where they actually have their offices around. And maybe finally for me, again, on this, is that citizens' appetite also needs to be regulated. Unfortunately, when it comes to spiritual commitments like you have over the Sallah, it is actually a spiritual journey, and of course, people wouldn't have some kind of alternative to it, because of course it comes with some kind of burden, and you must somehow, if you have the means, need to be able to make that sacrifice. But with the current reality, I guarantee you that it will be very tough for a lot of Nigerians to be able to access and afford what is already in the market.
All right, Dr. Tefa, would like you to share your concluding thoughts on this. Moving forward and beyond the Eid al-Kabir celebration, do you foresee a long-term effect? I'm tempted to say negative, but do you foresee a long-term effect, with the whole policies and removal of fuel subsidy that we've seen, over the course of the first 1 month of the president's assumption of office?
First of all, the reforms are important. It's important we face these reforms now. Remember in 2012, Jonathan would have been done with this fuel subsidy withdrawal. The same leadership
10 or 11 years.
Shut down Lagos, and so now we just have to face it. So the reforms are in the right direction. If we can be a bit straightforward as a country, we need the reforms. However, these reforms must be accompanied by social intervention and social safety net and investment in social infrastructure, very critical. Then with regards to the Sallah celebration, the demand curve for RAM is inelastic. Economic theory does not touch people's choices and values. You allow this person smoking to smoke. You allow the woman who prefers gold to buy gold in the market she wants. Economics does not touch those things. Rather, economic managers try to make their own economy attractive as a hub of investment for trade. And that's why the whole advantage of Continental Free Trade Agreement and all those things is important. As in microeconomic thinking, you have right to buy, you living in Kano, you have right to buy Gari from Lagos. The person in Lagos can choose to buy Kilishi from Kano. What's important is that the economy is moving and everybody has something to exchange. So where I'm going with that is that the hike in the price of RAM does not translate to inflation. For inflation to be seen to be happening, is a basket of goods and services taken together. The general price of the goods and services in that basket must be seen to increase. And the goods and services in that basket must come from agriculture, tech, food, water, everything. So the hike in the price of RAM is also historic. Remember, each time there's a festive period, even including Christmas, Easter, or the demand for key items like chicken, goats, RAM increases. So for the people trading, please don't introduce artificial pricing into your price of RAM, because demand for RAM is inelastic for the typical person who wants to celebrate Sallah. Don't make it look artificial. And government needs to increase their policing over market, all these people selling, price regulation, so that artificial people who raise price artificially will be done away, will be addressed.
All right, Dr. Tefa Abraham, thank you so much for your submissions, and it was quite an impressive and educative one. Also, Dr. Salahuddin Hashim, public commentator, thank you so much for joining on the program and sharing your thoughts. On the rise of commodities ahead of the Eid al-Kabir celebrations. We do hope that you join again once we come calling, despite the removal of the fuel subsidy and the cost of transportation. Husseina?
All right, well, with that, we've actually come to the end of Daybreak on Trust TV. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow on Daybreak Extra, same time, same station. I'm Dasha and Husseina Usman.
And I'm Sagir Ibrahim. Thank you so much for watching, and do join us again.